And a lot of us can find it difficult to access emotions at work. So if that is the case for some of our listeners today, you can really start to lean into that around loved ones and pets are kind of typical areas where people do actually can access feelings and feel okay to have emotions around those topics.
Your business's success depends on relationships, relationships with customers, relationships with employees, and relationships with stakeholders. What do they all have in common? They're all human. Because no matter if your business is B2B or B2C, it's really H to H, human to human. Welcome to the Human Connection Podcast. I'm your host, Karl Pontau. Each week, I'll bring you stories, insights, and practical advice from experts that you can apply to your growing company and daily life. This week, I'm excited to connect with Erin Thorpe. Erin is an author, speaker, and coach for leaders who struggle with conflict, communication, and performance during high-stress times. Erin supports teams in navigating difficult conversations, building powerful relationships, and communicating with empathy so they can lead confidently. Erin has a Bachelor of Science degree in Civil Engineering from the University of Calgary and holds 2 coaching certifications, one from Integral Coaching Canada and one from Positive Intelligence. She has over 20 years of experience leading projects and teams. In 2017, Erin authored Inside Out Empathy and began speaking and coaching about using the superpower of empathy to build effective teams. She shares her own stories of leadership and what she learned along the way. In 2024, she launched her podcast, Tactical Empathy, providing real-world insights on leading with empathy, engaging teams effectively, and achieving people-centered success. Erin is committed to discovering your leader within and supporting you to lead with impact from the inside out. Congrats on Inside Out Empathy, and welcome to the Human Connection Podcast.
Thanks, Karl. It's great to be here.
Yeah, so why do so many leaders struggle with empathy?
Good question. I think in all of the times I've asked that question on my own podcast, the common thread that I hear is just one, it requires us to be a little vulnerable, right? And depending on the situation and what's happening with the people on the other side of the table, the degree of that vulnerability can vary greatly. And if we ourselves are not in a space where we can access that vulnerability as leaders, it does make it difficult to then extend an empathic response to the person sitting on the other side of the table from us.
And I totally agree. And I think it's something that most leaders, when they train to quote unquote lead, it's not something that like you see in an MBA or like you learn in any sort of formal leadership training, quote unquote. And I think it's one of those seen as a soft skill that either you have or you don't. And really, it's a muscle that you can exercise and strengthen just like any other skill.
Yeah, you said the dreaded words of the soft skill. So I think it's a human skill, right? I think it's a people skill. I think there's 2 sides to leadership. There's a technical side, which has lots of frameworks and tools and techniques and things like that. And then there is the human side where we have to address things like psychological safety and emotional intelligence and having conversations about emotions. And I think that's where empathy really fits in. It's on the human side, the personal side. I do agree completely with you that this is not something that has been taught traditionally when we talk about leadership. I think there's also still a fairly largely held belief in a lot of our sort of senior leader ranks that there is no place for emotion at work, that it shouldn't be there. And I think we're starting to see the tides turn on that, but it's still one of those sort of kind of pervasive thoughts and biases that do exist in the leadership space.
Yeah, and I think it's something that there was a kind of 19th or 20th century mindset of like top-down hierarchies, and like what the boss says goes, and it's not a mindset that really works anymore when it comes to businesses, because with how fast things are changing and how much is going on and how many different kind of areas that leaders have to be aware of, if they wait to make decisions until it gets all the way up the hierarchy to them and then gets all the way back down to people that are actually on the front lines of interacting with customers or employees or in marketing, then you've already missed the opportunity. And so the entire paradigm of how companies need to be run and led, I think, is in dire need of improvement and restructuring and reimagining. And part of that is to be able to lead that way, you have to be able to connect emotionally with your team and be able to trust them and empower them. And empathy is the cornerstone thing of building those sort of trusting relationships, because before, with the previous method, it wasn't about trust, it was about just
Authority.
like following orders.
Yeah.
And that just doesn't work anymore.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, to back it up kind of even one step further, in order to connect with your team emotionally, like you have to be able to connect with yourself emotionally, right? And I think that's where I started with this. We got to drop into vulnerability. So we have to be able to say, like, I understand emotionally what's going on with myself. I understand my own feelings, what influences them, what I'm bringing into this conversation, and really access that side of ourselves before we can start doing that with other people. And so as leaders, if we don't practice that skill with self, it's going to be very difficult to do that with one person sitting across the table, let alone a team.
Yeah, and it's definitely, if you look at different like generations over over time of different groups, in that way, there's very different approaches or kind of trends with how they deal with emotional maturity or emotional mindfulness. And it's most are not well equipped to do that. So I can see why your coaching and your programs are so valued by people that understand that the importance of those things, because it is a missing skill set for so many people.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's just, as you said, it's a muscle, it's a skill. We need to practice it. If we're not practicing it, it's like any other muscle in our body, it's atrophying, right? It's getting weaker. And so if we want to be able to do this work and show up in this way and lead from a place of both the human connection and the technical connection, and skills that are required in leadership, we have to practice both.
So if there's someone who, when you start working with a leader and they present their empathy muscle and it's like a wet noodle and it's empathied or it's atrophied and you need to start working it out, what's that kind of first step or the first exercise that helps them rebuild it? That maybe if someone who's listening is thinking, oh my gosh, I'm totally need this, what can they start doing to rebuild it? And what are some of the success stories you've had from people that go through this process with you?
So I think it starts with building a vocabulary and an awareness in the individual. And the exercise to get there varies by person to person. If you already enjoy journaling and have a journaling practice, then that might be your entry point into this. And maybe you just journal on, how am I feeling today? Or, what did I feel yesterday when this came up? For other people who aren't journalers, because I'm kind of one of those that hit and miss with journals, sometimes it can be a bit of a walking meditation or a silent meditation where it's just a bit of tuning into self. I tend to do this when I go for my daily walks. I don't take a podcast or I don't wear headphones. Typically, I leave my phone in the house and I'm just out there, me and nature and kind of my thoughts. And I can really start to connect in and reflect on kind of where am I at and what am I feeling? For others, it might be talking it out, right? So it just depends on what is that vehicle that's going to be able to unlock that awareness for an individual. And as far as, kind of next steps, it's once that individual becomes aware of their own feelings, emotions, kind of landscape or weather, we might call it, then how do they start to communicate that and talk about it? Not in a way that's blaming or shaming, but just in a way like, hey, this is what's going on for me. Because a lot of us have a very limited emotional vocabulary. So I've used things like the feelings wheel, right? So we give them the exercise, which is either journal or walk or talk, and a feelings wheel. And it's like, okay, here you go. Let's build the vocabulary. Let's start to build the awareness. So it's a very kind of simple approach. And a lot of us can find it difficult to access emotions at work. So if that is the case for some of our listeners today, you can really start to lean into that around loved ones and pets are kind of typical areas where people do actually can access feelings and feel okay to have emotions around those topics. And so that's a great place to start. If it is really like the limp wet noodle, like you said, which is an excellent analogy. It just brings this great picture to my head. As far as success stories go, I think, I can think of one production manager who I was coaching a few years ago who really bought into and was kind of raised up in this belief that emotions did not belong at work. They worked in a manufacturing industry. So, it's very blue collar. It's come in, do your job, go home. And yet they were leading a team and there was a lot of change, a lot of uncertainty, technology's changing, customers are coming and going. So there's a lot of feelings that come up as they're managing these shift works, as they're, dealing with people who, especially post-COVID, like wouldn't show up to work, who would take the job and then just not show up or come 3 times and then just disappear. And so there was a lot of emotion there, but because they had this belief that they weren't allowed to feel it at work, it was very, you might use the word like emotionally constipated. It was very backed up and it was just like, there was just so much. And then it got to the point when we started working together where any conversation, would set off this very emotional response. So there would be, an out of proportion emotional response. So for some people that might look like tears at the drop of a hat. For other people that looks like no patience and yelling, or trying to dominate or, be aggressive in a conversation. So it can span a range, but it all stems back to this core symptom of just not having expressed what's really happening. And so through the course of our work, we did the exercises that I just explained to you and got them aware of what they were actually feeling in all of these different circumstances, got them used to the vocabulary, and then slowly, over time, was able to help them communicate what the feelings were about so that they could go in and have a productive conversation, and to be okay with that emotional expression at work. And again, we just start small, so it's not scary, and over time build up those skills to be like, yes, this is emotional for me. I have this big feeling. I'm frustrated. I'm overwhelmed. I care deeply, whatever it is. They learned how to communicate that. And then big decisions and big conversations weren't as scary. And they were actually able to then lead the team through all of this uncertainty, and have capacity for their team's emotions as well. Because if the leader's feeling it, I guarantee you the team's feeling it.
Yeah, definitely the leader's emotional state. I've heard the term I've heard it is infectious, where if they're stressed, everyone else gets stressed. If they're in a good mood, everyone else is in a good mood. And so I like what you said about helping them find areas where they do believe they can feel, like with pets or loved ones, and to help as like the starting point for building the vocabulary so that when they're at work, they can start to chip away at that, the wall they put up when they go there that they think they can't really allowed to feel, and there's actually blocking them up from and holding back all these emotions and not letting them express. I think that's another great way of visualizing what goes on, where to everyone else it seems like they're overreacting, but it's really because everything's kind of built up all this pressure and
Exactly.
There's no release valve.
Yep.
So it's, and I'm sure the leader's capacity to manage their emotions and connect with their other team members really helped with the issues that they're having with people not sticking around, like the things that were causing the problem, or that were seemed like they were causing the stress, but really might be have been symptoms or the impact of people really realizing, oh, I don't want to work for this leader because they're so like on edge or like high strung all this time, or like pent up, and people can, even if they can't necessarily put words to it, they can detect that, okay, this person is going to be difficult to work with because of what seems like maybe this personality, but it's really this emotional constipation, as you put it, where it's really volatile. And so that's interesting how it's what's seen as the cause of them being upset is really a symptom of their emotional constipation, as you put it, which is, it's an interesting development there.
Yeah, well, I think I know for myself and most of the people that I coach, we think that we are better at hiding how we're feeling than we really are. Right? We always think, oh, I'm just gonna, like, you know, you have a rough morning at home, or you get caught in traffic, or you are running late, and you breeze into the meeting, or you show up to the team and you're kind of like, I'm just gonna hide whatever just happened. Well, first of all, the team knows something's going on, whether you acknowledge it or not, because it shows. And I feel like the more we try to hide it, the more it shows. So it's a bit counterintuitive. And that was specifically what was happening with this leader that I shared about earlier, this production manager, is it had gone on for so long that like the entire team felt like they had to walk on eggshells around them, that they couldn't bring the big issues to them, that they were trying to solve problems on their own, making more mistakes. They weren't getting the support that they needed. There wasn't open lines of communication, like all of those things that we think are the symptoms, right? Or the problems are exactly what you said, are the symptoms of not being able to communicate on an emotional level with people and just say, hey, this is what's really going on with me. So the more we try to hide it, the bigger the issues become.
That, yeah, there's always that, like, the, how you doing? Fine. And you're like,
Yeah.
Are you sure?
Are you sure?
The way you just said fine there, and the way you're like, your eyes widen and like kind of freaked out for a second.
Yeah.
Yeah. No one's noticing the way you enter a room. They might not necessarily notice like what you're wearing or what you're like, the little things that you're probably thinking, oh my gosh, everyone's looking at my like little stain on my collar. But it's like, they'll notice the fact that your emotional state. They can read all the body language that
exactly
is communicating what you're trying to hide.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I find fascinating from the communication standpoint, the human connection standpoint, is that how much of it is the body language, and people don't know how much they're communicating and reading into things that's non-verbal. And so that how you doing? Fine is communicates way more than you think you're actually hiding.
Yeah. And so, you asked earlier about like, what's an easy entry point? I mean, there is a great easy entry point. When people ask you how you're doing, just try to be like 1% more open. Like, I had a rough morning, or it was tough to get here by 8 a.m. or I had a fight with the kids or the husband or the wife or the spouse, or, I got some big stuff going on in my family. Like, whatever is 1% more real and more vulnerable, at least then people can go, oh, okay, now I know why I'm getting this vibe of like things are a bit off. Because immediately what we do when people say I'm fine and we sense that they're not fine is we make it about us, right? We make up a story that says, well, the only thing that explains why they're saying fine and they're not fine is because they're mad at me and I don't know what that's about yet. And then you spend all this time getting worked up about them being mad at you, and it had nothing to do with you.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's something that helping people understand like kind of how you're really feeling helps them know when it's a good time to bring up those big issues, or when it's like when you're gonna have the emotional capacity to deal with that, and when or how to best explain it in a way, because they know if you're really stressed out or if you had a bad morning. Communicating that, obviously not like gushing at the first like question, but just letting them know, hey, I'm a little bit stress, give me a couple seconds to get settled before you bring that big issue to me so I can be in a better space, goes a long way to making the team run smoothly and people understand what's going on, and that communication and 1% more vulnerability, as you said, can really go a long way to making the team run smoother and preventing the buildup and the walking on eggshells and all the issues that you discussed earlier.
Absolutely. I mean, even if it's just as simple as like, hey, I didn't have a great night's sleep, I'm feeling tired today, or like whatever, just be real about what's going on in a way that doesn't throw you into like terror zone. Like I don't like to push people into, I mean, maybe slightly outside your comfort zone, but just slightly, still doesn't raise your heart rate, doesn't push you into anxiety, but just like, hey, this is the real thing of what's going on.
That is such great advice. Well, thank you so much for connecting with me today, Erin. If you enjoyed this episode of the Human Connection podcast, please leave a review, and share it. If you'd like to connect with myself or Erin, check out the links in the show notes. And remember, no matter if your business is B2B or B2C, it's really H to H, human to human. Happy connecting.